the thing that got really all over the internet was player housing.
Oh yes, of course.
I think
it's never happening.
As always, Preach has got misquoted. Poor bastard. People just keep on misquoting him and making MMO champion threads.
Yeah,
that's the cross he's got to bear.
Yeah, so what happens is, right, and this is the thing that happens all the time. It's not that he was misquoted. It's that Preach said something, and then through the translation layer in people's heads, they heard a very different thing. It's a very weird game of telephone, but everyone's brains are broken, and they can't hear right. That's what it kind of is. It's just, wait, so how can I take my editorial spin on this quote? That's what it always is. Everyone is a shitty Malcolm Tucker. That's more or less how it is. So for anyone who wants to think of it, Malcolm Tucker was a spin doctor for the Prime Minister in the fictional series, and he was an awful bastard, but very good at his job.
Yep.
He's just
good TV show.
Any single bit of information, he could turn it into exactly what he needed, and that's what everyone does online all the time. It's like, housing? Oh, you're not planning that? That immediately becomes either full doomerism. This game is dog shit. It's never going to have housing. Blizzard
hate casuals.
Bastards, and they hate people, and they hate casuals, and they don't want my money. I hope the whole, etc., etc., etc. And then other people go, they're not working on housing right now until they can improve the engine. 11.0, let's go. And you're like,
maybe 12.
Neither of those are the takes.
So
the only correct thing is, Preach said that they're not working on housing right now because it won't need some changes internally first. Cool. I guess that means we wait patiently and see when they say it's going to happen.
Yeah, like right now, you can maybe make a design document and some mock-ups and ask programmers to make it happen. But ultimately, the thing is, a lot of people don't really understand what a game engine is. I think this is something that has been really accelerated by tech demos and kind of like engine capability marketing stuff, which I think is like anyone who's a bit more technically minded kind of sees the discourse in game engines like... it can be a little bit rough, it's painful. It's also understandable because it's not people's job to understand how the sausage is made, really. But in this case,
that's where we have a real problem in video games because people don't understand how the sausage is made, and then they are fine to not do that, but then they talk like they do or they want to. You're like, either get into the arena or get out of the arena.
There's certainly...
Don't stay on the sidelines shouting advice to the combatants. Like,
there are times where you can see people like on YouTube and stuff give feedback, and it's like, oh, you're not a programmer. You're not a programmer. You've not wrote a renderer before. You don't. Oh no. Which again, it's like not their fault, and it still is in a way useful feedback because it can tell you what people are thinking and feeling, and that is important. Yeah. But ultimately, right, what is game engine? Really, it's just a whole bunch of tools that all kind of work together to make the thing that comes out the other end, right? So with this, there is clearly some aspect with their tools, because tools are the things that you actually build the game with. One of the tools for World of Warcraft is called WoW Edit, as an example. You'll have situations where maybe a lot of people will, they'll be used to Unity. A lot of people, though, they speak very highly about the editor in Unreal, saying it's very nice to use. I know a few studios where the gameplay designers and artists have successfully lobbied their way to a move to Unreal because it worked really well for their workflow. Even a thing, tools engineering. That's a thing, to make tools for your engine. And funny enough, they've hired a bunch more tools engineers, as you pointed out in the past video about the team expansion. So ultimately, right, work would need to be done to make the World of Warcraft engine have the functionality to get player housing as you and I would want it, right? And they're right. Garrisons 2.0 with very limited customization would not be that. We all agree that would probably suck. So that's that. Now, the thing is, it's easy for a company like that to do that. They just need to get a team, task the team, have it okay, whatever, timelines and shit. But the problem then is you run into a real bitch of a thing called opportunity cost, because all those engineers could also be doing anything else. The cost of making player housing, in addition to, the staff making it, is that those staff could be making something else. And is that thing more worthwhile? Who knows? But ultimately, that's why this sort of thing requires quite a chunky internal push, because at some point you have to bite the bullet and commit to a long-term project. It's one of those things that, it can be quite hard. Because if you rush into this too quickly, then, you are building the railway track as the train is hurtling down the track, and that can be really, really risky, right? So for a thing like this, like, you've got to draft up those technical requirements. The game designers have got to work out what are the things that they want to do in a system like this. Then the engineers have got to go and make that. And of course, with that, you've got, okay, well, what are the requirements of this from the art team? And it ends up, it's a whole initiative, whole big initiative that would take up a lot of people's time and effort. And almost like, do you know what I mean if I say organizational gravity? You know, the way it's like there's a project working inside a company, it just kind of like pulls resources towards it. But, it would take up a lot of that. And I think it's probably something they do want to do, but I think they know that it's a decently long-term thing. It's it's the kind of thing like, if you have experience working in any modern game engine, so for us, that would be Unity. For maybe some of you, that's Unreal, or I guess Godot, or, there's other engines out there. Player housing would be very easy to make a prototype of. But the problem for Blizzard then is, well, I have to do it in the Warcraft engine, and we don't really know what that looks like, right?
Well, we do know what it looks like because we have seen how tremendously buggy and busted this game can be at the best of times. Where you go, hey, why is this broken? How can you not just go and fix this one thing? It's like, hey, this trinket's doing more damage. Why can't you just go and make the number smaller? Like, why?
Yeah, often there is a reason.
Yeah, and then you imagine, it's clearly not because everyone's going... Like, basically, there's two reasons. It's no one's job to change the number, so the number doesn't get changed. That's one possible reason. And the other reason is changing the number takes a lot more time than you'd expect. And you're like, okay, well then, why is that? And you go, well, is it because there's a series of bugs making the number right? Is it because you have to change 40,000 things? You have to change that number like 40,000 times, and you're too busy because you have other things to do, such as get the next thing ready to ship. Or like, it's not necessarily a satisfying reason to the end user. It almost never is. It's usually a problem of, this was the seed of a problem 10 years ago, and now it's blossomed into this big tree that's in the middle of our game. We can't do anything with it. That's likely a lot of it. Because you think, well, Blizzard balance your game, and you'd think it's, we'll go to the big number that says, too much, and they'll make the big number that says too much say just enough.
Yeah, because they have auras to buff and debuff, debuff with.
Clearly, it's a massive piece of shit that has loads of interconnected things that you have to actually manage to tweak. Yeah. It's even seeing like some devs who like post about like when they're making things. That's like the idea to me that, as an example, Scars. I was like, I made a couple items this morning. I'm like, how does making a couple items take time? Is it not just, from the complete just user perspective, all you see is there's the stats, there's the effect, there's the icon. How does it take more time than that? And then you go, well, obviously there's a reason. What's the reason? Are there 40 million thousand bits of data behind the scene that you need to put in for an item that have all these feedbacks that just take longer? Or is it like...
Are the tools not great?
Yeah, is it actually hard to do that? As an example, does the thing you're making the thing on keep crashing and you lose your progress halfway through? It's like anyone who works with it, like Adobe, whenever something like a shitty update goes, you're like, I could do this in 3 hours, but it took me 6. Why? Because Premiere just didn't work. Yeah. Like, happens. Happens all the time.
And the thing is, like, that knocks you off. And the thing is, like, that can knock you off your day's work on the thing that your producers tasked you with doing. Now, on the other side, then, QA has reported a bug. This bug has ping-ponged around a whole chain of people. It finally got to your producer, who's finally said, hey, could you deal with this bug? But, wait, the thing crashed and you lost a few hours of work. Yeah. Like, you can have one day where you get a bit knocked off schedule at work, and that like fucks up your next fortnight. Yeah. Or like you have to work really hard to claw it back. And that's what it's like when you're dealing with this many people. There's a lot of chaos. That's how bugs happen, right? So it's the sort of thing where, like, obviously they have the money to make player housing, no shit. But turns out there is more to that when it comes to running a company and running a team. And if running a team was as simple as create a list of priorities and do them all, then a lot more companies would be a lot more successful. But it actually turns out that deploying a plan at scale is itself a lot harder than people think. It's very easy to plan out in your head and to think about, but as anyone who's been, implementing plans and shit will know, like, plans don't survive contact with the enemy. That's how it is.
Yeah, I mean, Graham said, I'm out of day today just because of Active Directory alone. As someone who used to work in an IT support place, I'm sorry to hear that. Fucking Windows. God, I hate Windows.
There you go.
Yeah, just like a day. You go, well, there's a day. What if that happens once a week? Look at that. You just lost 20% productivity from members of staff. Probably 40%, because they'll spend another day silently screaming into their desk because they're so pissed off, but losing 20% of the productivity.
Yeah.
It's brutal. Like,
so that's basically, that's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, if people, like, if you want to know some of how we think when it comes to, like, making games, like, even Pale has changed a hell of a lot throughout its development, but we tried to really go as limited in scope as we could.
Yep.
Because we know, like, we have this amount of money, which means this much time from this many people. If we don't do that, we're dead.
Yeah.
I guess sometimes in the indie sphere, like, the way that you're forced to be thrifty because you have such financial constraints is, like, helpful, and it does help to keep you lean. That's why startups are able to enter markets and disrupt companies that are so much larger than them. I mean, think about that, right? Like, how does a startup, with, like, I don't know, 15 people end up disrupting a market with humongous, multi, many million or billion incumbents? And it turns out because once you reach a certain scale, it takes a lot of fucking time to turn the ship. And that's why startups can go in there and disrupt shit. And I guess if you want to compare, like, the ability for an indie developer, maybe a good example of this is the Vampire Survivors team, which is absolutely tiny, because it was just one guy. And, he can quickly make some changes. I mean, Thomas was looking at the Steam forums, like you'll have seen if you did any bug reports or anything in the Steam forums, like, usually within a few hours, Thomas would have a response for you. And, it would be quick, but that's because, he's developing it. It's easy for him to do that, right? When you're lean, you can just be very agile. But then when you're big and large, a company like this, it's a whole different kettle of fish.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I will put a bit of a disclaimer here, which is, Anubitan says, for the amount of money that I put into WoW per year for over a decade, pretty sure Blizzard's inconveniences aren't my problem.
That's also true.
And that's where you run into this. It sounded like we were just running defense for Blizzard. I think the way I always try to come from this perspective is it's kind of a little bit of dealing with good faith and, I guess, realism, where shit's going to be really hard for them. That is profoundly their problem and not yours, because you pay for the product.
Yeah.
That's always going to be true. You pay for what value you actually want out of your product. It is their responsibility to make the game good and playable for you. But at the same time, you can't just go, that's your problem, solve it immediately.
Yeah, and if it turns out...
That would be lovely if it were the case, to just go, you take all my money and make it good. That would be beautiful, but unfortunately it is not how it actually works.
Yes, and the thing is, Blizzard is a older, more traditional company, and this has led to it having a lot of weaknesses. There's a fairly important concept about staff, about decision makers, and their exposure to frontline staff conditions and, like, the real concerns that, like, staff will have. Is the video by McKinsey or is it from Barron's? Not Barron's. I forget. Anyway, it's like, see, now we're kind of like getting into the whole management theory and all that shit.
Yeah.
But that stuff's actually really, really important. And from what I understand, this may be something that's changing, but for the longest time, Blizzard was a very top-down, hierarchical company. And I think whenever you start to have larger and larger and larger team sizes, and you're operating in a very top-down, hierarchical way, you lose a hell of a lot of agility. So if it turned out that, Riot could come in with, I don't know, half the staff getting twice the pay and run a tighter, more agile ship, maybe they could ship more content, and maybe then, in that case, they would find more success than Blizzard would, because they're better at running a team. And the game is the output of the team. So the thing you have to get right first is running the team. You can't go straight to making the game good. I mean, that's obviously the goal, number one. But the way to do that Just to run the team really well.
Yeah, you build a tool to do the job. You don't do the job, I guess, in the way, which is, I guess kind of normal. I mean, there's an example of someone I know, I won't say the name, but literally like basically they have a job, but they don't really do anything.
Oh yeah.
Because they're just waiting on the people who give them the money to tell them what to do. So just they're like, work on your own stuff, but you don't have anything on your own to do. You don't have a project you're attached to. Okay, just get paid for not doing a whole pile. And you're like, obviously for an individual, it's like, sweet, I have to do nothing and I get paid, which can be bad in itself. But it's like, that's for the organization. That's not very good. That's just throwing money in the bin.
Yeah.
And it's all because they don't just go, well, you can do whatever you want that's a value add, or here's some shit for you to do. And that's the thing where, I think there's maybe a little bit of that happening more in Dragonflight, where there's clearly a lot of just, do you want to do this? Fuck it, go for it. There's an example I'll bring up slightly later, where it's like, this seems like an idea that they probably would have been like really worried about and really like, oh, there's lots of things could go wrong with this if they did it before. But because of how Dragonflight set up, they just went, fuck it, do it, it's cool. And continue watching to find out what that is later on. But yeah, so it is, hopefully it's all improved. It seems to be all improved, but it is just Blizzard are not a very great company set up for success, and they're trying to change that. At least modernly now. Yeah,
because that's just what happens when you have a company that is, I don't want to say old, but comes from an older era where like there's just aspects of like management theory. Yeah. I think as can be, accelerated, done better and done worse by kind of like modern technology and stuff. Because obviously, like so many of the big management books that everybody will know, like, the habits of the effective executive.
I mean, that's
all those fucking,
yeah, I mean,
there's a lot of eye rolling that can happen within that genre, by the way. But Blizzard got by, but there comes a point when you are so large that you need to think, okay, right, how the fuck do we actually run this show good?
Yeah, I mean, isn't like
look at Insomniac. Actually, if you want like the counter example here, Insomniac games.
What about them?
Just the sheer amount of fucking shit they're making.
Oh yeah, that's right, because they've got Spider-Man and Wolverine on the go. And do they have any other confirmed projects? I can't remember, but they're probably doing something.
I just remember people being like shocked at the seeming efficiency of that company.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, I was in the Dragonflight video. God of War Ragnarok had at some point, I think it was, what did I say, like 2021, I think, or some point that the God of War team had 250 people. Obviously a load of outsourced for arts and stuff as well. But 250 people made God of War Ragnarok. You're like, there's 735 people working on World of Warcraft. What? What do you mean? What the hell is that about? But that's a part of tools. That's a part of engine. That's a part of project size and scope. But there's something else I was going to say. Oh yeah, it was as Morgan 13 said, FF14 successful because Yoshi P is good at project management.
Yeah.
How true that is versus the quality of the individual staff is different. How much that impacts is whatever. Because obviously you look at Soken, you go, well, Soken's a fucking turbo genius composer. You can tell in how it works.
But if he was purely project managed, it could be a disaster.
Yeah, the amount of music he pumps out, and that's probably because Yoshi P is like, right, well, you can make X amounts of music and things, so do that, and he was off to do it then, sir. But that's the thing where that's the narrative around that, where he is just a big spreadsheet man, and goes, how do I spreadsheet people? Now you figured out how to spreadsheet people, and now you've got patches every 4 months like clockwork, and they always have cool new stuff in them. And you're like, well, why is that? Is it because he's planning everything, going, here's the great big feature here, it's going to be perfect, and you go do that? He's probably not micromanaging. He likely just goes, all right, Mr. Ozma, go make it ultimate. And Mr. Ozma goes, Echo, we're never going to clear this boss, I swear to God. Good luck, Scribe and Go. But yeah, I think that's how it goes. It's literally just they're fast now. They're fast at speed. Haven't you talked about that Blizzard should invest in more smaller Warcraft themed games? Yes, Slicing, I was literally thinking about that as an answer here.
Right for
where it goes, hey, so you've got a problem where World of Warcraft's hard to make content for, then now this is they'd never do this because it would be very financially inefficient. But all you just go at, hey, your 12-month sub comes with any game that's released in the World of Warcraft IP, and we release one of those every 6 months. They're micro games, and we've got like 200 people working on a load of Warcraft micro games, but we've got that. Wouldn't that be great? Hey, sorry, you have to wait an extra month for a World of Warcraft patch, but here's a Warcraft game you could play. it's a fucking card battler, not like more like a Slay the Spire with Hearthstone, or here's a tile based puzzle game, or here's
narrative adventure.
Here's a narrative
whatever.
adventure that's like one of like the Telltale games, but it's like an hour long, and you go, sick. Was that worth a month of waiting for a Warcraft patch? Hopefully that's the point. And you go, shit, yeah, it's a good idea. And that would get around the way of like, oh, well, we can't make content for the Warcraft, it's so hard.
Yeah, and that's,
idea.
you look at Riot with Riot Forge, which is their, their whole, like, licensing their IP to indie devs.
Yep.
Like, that whole initiative, which I think's a really good value add, right? So,
Indeed.
yeah, how can they be a bit more modern and all kind of loose and agile, I suppose?